Good afternoon from the UK and welcome to this final webinar in Container News' Cargo Integrity Seminar Series. Today we will be discussing the lashing of containers, who should do it where, and the packing of containers and what happens to cargo when a large ship is in a storm. My name is Nick Savvides. I'm the Managing Editor at Container News. We've been running the Cargo Integrity campaign for most of this year, publishing monthly stories at the beginning of each month regarding the health and safety in the marine industry and health and safety within the marine industry. The Cargo Integrity campaign and this Cargo Integrity series have been kindly sponsored by the TT Club, and we are very grateful to them. Last week we discussed the difficulties caused by misdeclared or non-declared dangerous cargoes. This was mainly in connection with ship fires or illegal cargoes. This week we will see how misdeclared cargoes have a major effect on the stability of a vessel and the container stack in which the box is stowed. High-profile losses, including the MSC Zoe, which lost 342 containers off the Dutch coast, are a testament to the dangers of misdeclared cargo. Losses overboard are rare, according to the National Cargo Bureau, which is based in the US, but when they do happen, they affect the environment and local industries. The effect on the environment and local industries can be catastrophic. Witnessed in 2018, the MSC vessel lost a number of containers overboard, containing some 47 tons of nurdles. And for those of you that don't know what a nurdle is, and I didn't before this incident, these are little plastic pellets the size of a lentil, often very see-through and hard to see, and they just get lost in the water and attract toxins, and then they wash up on the beach. They're very difficult to clear up. This incident happened off the coast of South Africa, and the pollution stretched for hundreds of miles along the coast. And as far as I am aware, that clean-up campaign may still be going on. I also heard that there was another loss, a similar loss off the South African coast more recently, but I haven't confirmed that yet. Today, we'll also hear about a crew's eye view of lashing containers, sometimes while a vessel is still travelling, and the potential dangers and why trade unions have fought hard to get ship operators to agree to the docker's clause, which prohibits anyone other than a trained docker to handle lashing work. Then we'll hear some reasons why packing a container properly is about more than just throwing cargo into a box. It's the potential damage can be caused by the potential damage that can be caused by poorly packed boxes. And finally, we'll hear from a speaker from the Dutch Safety Board giving a rundown of how the technical issues with lashing, what causes and effects they have. Our first speaker today will be Christian Roos from the International Transport Workers Federation, an inspector in Antwerp, Belgium, followed by Master Mariner Daniel Millett from Brookes Bell, from the marine consultancy Brookes Bell. Our final speaker will be Leanne van der Veen, an investigator with the Dutch Safety Board. We will also have a question and answer session at the end of the presentations, and those of you that attended in previous weeks will know that if you have a question, to post it in the box to the right of your screens. Any questions that we don't manage to answer on this seminar, then we will answer by email later. Finally, if you encounter any technical issues during the webinar, please chat to Catherine, who is managing the webinar, through your chat function. But for now, I'd like to welcome our first speaker from the International Transport Workers Federation, Christian Roos. Thank you.
Located. My name is Christian Roos. I'm ITF inspector in Belgium. Today I'm invited to talk about lashing and disputes. At present, most of the crew lashings is taking place on container and feeder vessels and on RoRo vessels. The ITF has a clear policy when it comes to cargo handling, and besides that policy, the ITF has, in all its approved collective agreements, a non-seafarers work clause. Before proceeding to the clause, I want to take a minute to explain the types of agreements which exist today when I talk about collective agreements. For 2020, the numbers are not yet available, but in 2019, 12,800 flag of convenient vessels were covered with an ITF-approved collective agreement covering 311,500 seafarers. The ITF special agreement is in fact a contract. A kind of contract. The contract specifies the duration of the collective agreement and specifies which collective agreements are applicable amongst other elements. The ITF Standard Agreement is the first collective agreement ever. The wording of this collective agreement is the backbone for many other types of agreements. The content of the agreement is non-negotiable. There is only one type of standard agreement. The ITF Uniform Total Crew Cost Collective Agreement is a non-negotiable collective agreement. The agreement specifies a total crew cost principle. There are many types of the ITF Uniform TCC agreements as signatory affiliates have developed their own copies. About 26% of the covered FOC vessels are under a Uniform TCC agreement. The International Bargaining Forum Collective Agreements, or IBF agreements, are for ship owners or crewing companies who are member of the International Maritime Employment Council, or IMEC, the joint negotiation group where the unions and the ship owners or crewing companies have an equal representation, thus negotiate the content and clauses of the agreement. There are many types of IBF agreements, again developed by the unions of the signatory ITF affiliates. About 70% of the covered FOC vessels are under an ITF agreement. All ITF-mentioned ITF collective agreements need approval from a vetting group before they can be applied. The national collective agreements are negotiated and concluded by the ITF-affiliated unions. It is expected that the applicable wages are above the ILO minimum guidelines, and the ITF policy requests that the ITF affiliates embed a non-seafarers work clause in their collective agreements. The ITF position on lashing is that inside ports the lashing should be done by dockers. On maritime access ways between open seas and ports, the crew should not be tasked to lash or unlash the cargo. Every vessel should leave her berth with the cargo lashed in compliance with the cargo lashing manual, and it should arrive on the berth with the cargo lashed as well. As maritime access ways are often located in shallow waters, there is no need to put extra lashing. Cargo should not be lashed at open sea before entering the port or unlashed, or in shallow waters. Crew should never be tasked to lash or unlash cargo unless the safety of the crew, cargo and vessel are in danger. The non-seafarers working clause had before another name. The cargo handling clause, also known as the dockers clause. The clause was first embedded in the ITF Standard Agreement and in the ITF Uniform TCC agreements. In early 2000s, when the IBF type of agreement was first time negotiated, it was included as well. In February 2018, after negotiations in the joint negotiation group, new wording was agreed. The wording which is on this slide and the following slides was negotiated between the unions and the employers. The new wording became effective from 1st January 2020. Ship owners and terminals had nearly 2 years to reorganize to get all in place by then to comply with the clause. Terminals, as they may have to train and hire new workforce. The main change in today's wording and the previous wording is that the term traditionally or historically done by dock workers was lifted out of the text, and the sentences and wording were upgraded without many changes on the content. Today, there are court cases in the Netherlands because some principals are breaching the non-seafarers work clause each time they come in the port. An agreement is an agreement, and if not adhered to and conversation does not help, going to court is one of the remaining steps. And no one can ask why. A. Shipowners not rejected the changes in the non-seafarers work clause during the negotiations, and B. Why they suddenly have issues with the content of a clause which was already nearly 20 years in force and negotiated by them and approved by them. The two other elements of the clause specify mainly that seafarers cannot take over the work of dockers when there is an industrial action, and the other one is about financial compensation for doing lashing work. Lashing is, as mentioned an extremely dangerous job. I have been in a seafarers training centers many times, and as a former docker who has made lashing, I can say the training that seafarers are receiving is the absolute minimum. It is not the same as the training dockers are receiving. There is more than turning a buckle or hanging a lashing rod. There are, for example, today elements who are not receiving attention which are resulting in injuries. The training of dockers is improving every day. The training I received 30 years ago was very much like the one seafarers are receiving today. Today my back is not so happy for what I did physically wrong in the past. Dockers have specific working clothes and personal protective equipment for lashing activities. For example, helmets which should not limit visibility. Seafarers are receiving the cheapest gear to use. Shoes are often larger than their own feet, especially for the Far East crews working on vessels belonging to Western principles. Safety harnesses compensating the lack of outboard and lashing platform fencings are only there pro forma. Hardly used in reality as there are not all the time places to attach, and because movements are limited and there is not enough crew to assist each other when doing lashing. That is one of the reasons why dockers do not use the harnesses. There are many dangers when doing lashing. Fencings, walkways, lashing platforms, communications, a shipboard risk assessment if available is often only there pro forma. The next slides will show some pictures which are more or less self-explanatory. The left picture and the right picture show two issues which are impacted by the use of high cube containers. Here we can see that there is no lashing platform and that lashing bars need to be handled above chest height, which put extra pressure on the spine and increases the risk to fall. The gent is now standing without protection against falling down. There is no outboard fencing on the left picture. On the right picture we can see a narrow passway between the bays. Again, high cube containers. There are no lashing platforms. The dockers need to climb the ship structure to unlash. Most of that pictures are actually taken in one vessel, one and the same vessel. On the left picture we can see a manhole which is not protected. On the right picture we see again on the highest container no sufficient fencing to prevent falling down. The left picture shows a seafarer practicing alpinism to make lashing. The right picture shows again a missing fencing. Each year ITF inspectors are confronted with cases concerning loss of life. I have got too many in the past years. The following is telling how dangerous lashing is, especially when made when the vessel is not berthed. We are May 20th, 2019, and Maersk released on its website the following. Sunday morning, Maersk Patras reported man overboard in the St. Lawrence River. Search and rescue operation was unsuccessful and has now been called off. On 19 May 2019, at approximately 9:30 local time, the second officer of the vessel Maersk Patras fell overboard into the St. Lawrence River. Several vessels, including Maersk Patras, supported also by airborne assets, were involved in the search and rescue operation, coordinated by the Marine Search and Rescue Center of the Canadian Coast Guard. Search and rescue operation began immediately and was called off in the evening about approximately 2000 local time. Besides the info on the slide, my colleagues in Canada, after investigating the matter, reported also as follows. The vessel was westbound in the St. Lawrence going from Antwerp to Montreal. The vessel was approached Les Écomines. QC pilot station was close enough that the pilot boat had left their dock and was heading towards the Maersk Patras. The second officer was part of the unlashing gang with the second officer, 1AB, 1OS, third engineer and chief cook. He was using a bar that measured 4.5 meters long and weighed 22.5 kilo. According to the captain, the second mate was 160 centimeters tall and weighed 60 kilos. Well, while using the bar, it was vertical, reaching up to the top of the second container height, and at this point the bar and him began to sway, and the weight took him overboard at 9:28 on the port side. The crew began yelling "man overboard" over the radio. However, as per other crew captains, the screaming was very difficult to understand. When they finally understood and pressed the "man overboard" button, it was 9:31. At this time, the captain and crew on bridge were looking from the bridge wings and requested help over the radio to the pilot boat and any nearby ships. Because of the expected pilot boarding, the vessel had slowed down, and therefore a Williamson turn or other maneuvers wouldn't have worked or been practical. The pilot boat was in a much better position to begin looking as they were heading that way. Meanwhile, the chief mate ordered an ordinary seaman with a radio to watch from the poop deck, while the chief mate and two other crews went to the port aft rescue boat. While the two crewmen maintained eyes on the water, the chief mate proceeded to lower the rescue boat. After complications with some stuck buttons, they could not release the rescue boat. They had to come back up, at which point a stuck gear prevented the rescue boat to safely come up. They had to relower it and come up a ladder. Once back, they went down in the starboard side rescue boat and searched for hours. They continued to search but found nothing. This was further complicated by a couple of false sightings. The officer was not found back. Another element which needs attention is shipboard stress and shore leave. It is reported that long contracts, changing the work shift, for example changing watch schedules combined with overtime, permanent influence of physical parameters over 24 hours per day are only a few examples representing the high stress to which seafarers are permanently exposed on board. This is the case especially on feeder vessels in the North Sea and the Baltic. Some feeder vessels are calling several terminals in one port. This generates a large workload for the crew. There are many tasks to cover, such as arrival and departure maneuvers, mooring operations, and monitoring the cargo operations. And then sometimes they are tasked to do lashing and securing. The high workload brings fatigue. Their personal resources can be strengthened by distracting their thoughts from their work routines through leisure time activities outside of the vessel. Visiting seaman centers may help them to distance themselves from their work on board for a while and allow them to experience relief and relaxation through social contacts and care. Unfortunately, due to the short turnaround times in the ports and the extra cargo handling work crew need often to perform, there is no time for shore leave. And today, with the COVID pandemic, many seafarers are not even leaving the vessel, this to avoid getting infected. A study of the World Maritime University, which will be presented over 2 weeks, shows that about 90% of the rest hours records are being adjusted to correspond with international standards. Whilst adjusted is the neutral word, falsified is actually the correct word to apply. There are many watchkeeping programs assisting the crew tasked with recording the rest hours records to ensure that the Maritime Labour Convention and international standards are not breached. Breaches may flash even red, and some programs even forbid the user to save and close the file as long breaches are being recorded and not adjusted. Another element is that MLC standards are double on resting hours. Ship owners prefer to choose option B, which allows the crew to work 394 hours per month. That equals with 13 hours each day. Under the Maritime Labour Convention and with approval of the flag states, fatigue is more or less promoted. In the real world, we do find 370 to 380 hours per month being done by feeder vessel crews. In some cases, even correct recorded. Flag states do play an important role in this, but at the same time, we do know that commercial considerations do play a huge role when the minimum safe manning certificate is confirmed. The document is often based on the needed working hours to bring the vessel from A to B and to comply with the minimum requirements as per standards. And when one suggests putting an extra deckhand, one may get the answer that the vessel actually don't have any capacity to take an extra person. We are September 2016 and in a campaign week, a feeder vessel is being boarded by my colleague Mark van Holten and myself. Whilst talking with the crew, Mark noticed something is not okay with one of the APs. And when the gentleman stands up to bring his lunch plate to the galley, he collapses. He was taken to the hospital. And in the hospital he was diagnosed with a total exhaustion. He was kept there for 3 days before he was repatriated home. And at the airport gate, the staff refused him to get him on board of the plane. He was sent again to the doctor in the airport before he was allowed to travel. Can you imagine that? Port State Control and we as ITF inspectors inspected the vessel, but we could not identify any breaches against the working hours. 375 hours per month were recorded for the previous month, which is still 20 hours less than what is the absolute maximum. The crew told that they were taking vitamins to stay awake on duty. When I contacted the principals and advised them to reduce the work hours from the crew by taking an extra hand, they answered that they will send a cadet to the ship to do the lashing. We are now near the end of my presentation. Meanwhile, I may have not respected some time limits. Some parties are tabling that extra work brings extra salary in the pocket of the crew. This is a pretty bold statement, because during the action weeks, few years ago, we did check the level of extra earnings, and it's staggering what is being paid. If they are getting paid at all, because it happens that lashing payments are paid to the vessel but never get to the hands of the crew, quite often the lashing payments are not even recorded in the wages accounts of the crew. They are not official. Payments are made in cash, and a simple note with a signatory, as you can see on the slide, is all what is recorded. Some of the crew is doing actually the job during their free time. Can we use here the term black money? I think yes, we can. Some people talk about a significant increase of the wages. The truth is that an average of 30 to 80 US dollars per month is far from a significant increase of salary. With this slide, I want to close and thank Container News and Nick to give me the opportunity to show a different side of crew lashing. I do want to thank as well all participants to listen. If you have any questions after this webinar, feel free to contact me. Thanks for your attention. Over to you, Nick.
Lines or liner shipping's representatives to come on the webinar and discuss this issue with us. None of them would turn up. But one of the issues that I did find while looking into this, however, is that the court case that you referred to, the lines were looking to use competition regulations to suggest that the Dockers clause was in fact illegal under European competition law, which I've never heard of before, commercial law being used. Perhaps we can go directly to Leanne van der Veen, who from the Dutch Safety Board, who's going to actually discuss one of the major accidents of recent times of the MSC Zoe. Thank you for taking over, Leanne.
Yes, thank you, Nick. And it's always difficult when you lost connection, so I'm happy to step in. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present something about an investigation we did on the loss of the containers by the MSC Zoe. First of all, I want to give you, for those who doesn't know, a quick overview what we do at the Dutch Safety Board. Our mission is to have non-blame investigations, and our main focus is those situations in which civilians are dependent on the government, companies or organizations for their safety. We are a multimodal board, and of course I'm in the maritime department. In the maritime department we have an obligation that we need to apply, of course, if there's an accident, and the most severe category is very serious casualties, and that means when there's a loss of life, there's a total loss of a ship, or there is severe pollution. And in the case of the MSC Zoe, the lost containers, this comes in the category of severe pollution, and therefore we had the obligation to investigate. As the Netherlands, we were not the flag state of the MSC Zoe, that was Panama. But together with Panama and Germany, we started this investigation. Some factual information on the casualty. MSC Zoe is a Panamanian flagged ULCS, was built in 2015 and was the largest ship when she was built at that time. She has a length overall of 95 meters and 40 centimeters, breadth of 59 meters. Capacity, you can see it here. In 2019, the 1st of January at night, she was sailing from Sines to Bremerhaven. And at some point that evening, she entered the TSS, the traffic separation scheme of the Schelling German Bight. The wind was north-northwesterly and had a force of 804. And when she was in the TSS, she was experiencing beam seas. The crew recorded some periods of heavy rolling, and eventually she lost 342 containers. As I said earlier, this was a joint investigation between the flag state Panama, coastal state affected Netherlands, and Germany. You can see here the track she sailed that night. She came into the TSS at around 7 local time, and there was several points on which she lost containers that night. A team of investigators went to Bremerhaven when she arrived there to see the damage, of course, interview the people on board, make pictures and gather all the evidence. You can see here some pictures that we took when we were on board the MSC Zoe in Bremerhaven. Next to the damaged containers on board, of course, there was a lot of environmental damage. We had really polluted beaches, and I think in the bottom left picture you see the plastic pellets that Nick was talking about earlier that also polluted the beaches of South Africa. We also had them on our Wadden Isles here in the Netherlands, but also on the Wadden Isles in Germany. Of course, most of the containers luckily were recovered from the seabed, and together with the Dutch organization of Rijkswaterstaat and a contractor contracted by MSC, a lot of containers were restored from the seabed, and in this slide you see the positions where we found the most debris of the containers. And you see that there are at least 6 positions in which debris of containers were found. So that is made us assume that there are at least 6 moments of containers lost overboard. I'm not sure if this slide is really readable for you, but we made some timeline and sequence of events, and you see that this one is the first loss we saw based on the recovery of the containers. And at this point, the crew actually witnessed this was the period of heavy rolling, and at this stage the crew actually saw containers falling overboard. And you can see this was 1:30 local time in the early morning of the 2nd of January, and this was already 8 local time in the evening of the 1st of January. So there was a lot of time between the first actual loss and when the crew first became aware of seeing containers falling overboard. This case of the MSC Zoe, actually we did 2 investigations. There was a joint investigation into the causes of the accident, and this was the investigation together with Flag State Panama and the other coastal state affected, Germany. In the Netherlands, we started an additional investigation into the route-specific risks of this shipping route, which can lead to the loss of containers for large container vessels like the MSC Zoe. I want to talk a little about the joint investigations. The key questions in these investigations were what caused, of course, the loss of containers from the MSC Zoe, and how can the risk of container loss overboard be better managed. The investigations did not look into the incident response and crisis management following the accident. And of course, I said joint investigations into the causes. We got some help from research institutes, and for the sea conditions, we asked Deltares to do a study for us. And as you can see in this slide, we took 3 points in the southern route on the next to the Wadden Isle, but it's also a deep water route that's a bit more to the north. And we also there took a reference point, and we asked Deltares to see what the actual sea conditions were at the time of the accident. These sea conditions were input for a study by Marin and the TU from the Technical University from Hamburg to look at the ship motions of model ships based, of course, on the MSC Zoe. We didn't use the model of the MSC Zoe because we wanted to get a broader prospect in the range of ultra-large container ships. And we took some reference points, and if you remember the slide of the recovery of the containers, these were points where actual containers were lost. Here you see some pictures of the basins test at Marin, and this all led to 4 phenomena actually that we discovered in this basin test. There was some heavy slamming. We had green water, but what we also saw in the northern route is there was a high risk of touching the seabed. Of course, this because of the deep water route. It was not the case in the northerly route, but in the southerly route, there was a big chance of hitting the seabed with these kind of waves under these sea conditions. As I said, as a result of these simulations and tests conducted, 4 hydrodynamic phenomena were observed that are considered to have played a role in the loss of containers by the MSC Zoe. There were extreme ship motions and accelerations. There was contact or near contact with the sea bottom, as you saw in the previous slide. Lifting forces and impulsive loading on containers due to green water, and slamming-induced impulsive loading on the ship's hull. And what we concluded in this investigation is that the MSC Zoe experienced 4 different hydrodynamic phenomena, either individual or in combination, that played a role in the loss of containers. The main cause of the loss of containers by the MSC Zoe was the high stability at which the ship was sailing in a beam sea scenario in the shallow water conditions, where it encountered a combination of these 4 phenomena. The encountered transversal accelerations were at the design limits, leading to failure of the container structure and or the lashing equipment and subsequent container loss. If we talk about the high stability of the MSC Zoe, the MSC Zoe sailed with a corrected GM of 9.01, sailing in, and of course this is what we call a high stability condition. As a result, the MSC Zoe was more likely to show a higher roll response to the wave periods present in this part of the North Sea, resulting in strong ship motions. The actual GM of the MSC Zoe is typical for these kind of vessels in this operation. The high stability of ultra-large and wide container ships leads to shorter natural periods than smaller ships with lower stability. If we talk about the large accelerations, the shorter periods, as I said, result in higher accelerations. And we experienced that the MSC Zoe had insufficient roll damping. This is a picture of the inclinometer on board. It's a mechanical one. And I'm not sure if it's really visible, but you can see, based on the inclinometer, the vessel should have had roll angles of 30 degrees. The TU Hamburg did a study, and it's impossible to have a heel angle of 30 degrees, because before then the MSC Zoe most definitely should have hit the bottom. So what we found out is that a roll angle of 16 degrees for the crew and for the clinometer, the mechanical clinometer, felt as a heeling angle of 30 degrees. So that large were the accelerations. If we come to the lashing equipment and the large accelerations, the lashing equipment and container structures present on the MSC Zoe or ultra-large container ships are similar on all other types of container ships. But in general, the capacity of individual container ships doubled over the last 15 years. So the growth resulted in container ships carrying more containers on deck. The length and operational GM of ULCSs like the MSC Zoe exceed the valid range of most international technical regulations and standards for calculations of accelerations. These design limits for lashing containers on ULCSs are determined by complicated software calculations and are not transparent anymore at the time. Based on the investigations, we of course had some recommendations in the report. And one recommendation, we sent recommendations to the flag states administration and to the administration of the Netherlands and Germany. And we recommend them to go to IMO and say that the existing technical and legal regulation for container ships regarding the design limits of cargo securing equipment, approved loading and stability conditions, and the consideration of shallow water effects and speed on ship's motion and resulting accelerations and forces need to be revised and reconsidered and reapproved, actually. So this is a recommendation we did to 3 administrations in order to have somebody, if you come into the IMO and you want something changed. Other recommendation we did was also to the administrations to go to IMO to generate an obligation on all container ships to install electronic inclinometers or similar inertia systems to measure and display this information in real time to the captain and the crew, and to install sensors on critical locations on the ship in order to measure accelerations and to provide this information in real time to the captain and the crew, in order to allow them to monitor these. And last but not least, for ships with mandatory equipped VDR, to record actual roll angle, roll periods, and accelerations for the purpose of safety investigations. The reason why we did a recommendation on the measurement of accelerations and a digital inclinometer is that, as we saw in previous slides, the MSC Zoe lost containers way before the crew became aware that they lost containers. So that is why so it's possible that you lose containers from such a large ships without even noticing it. The last recommendation, or one of the other recommendations we did, is that there evaluate and assess possible technical solutions that can assist the captain and the crew in the detection of the loss of containers, and proposed international standards for implementation of such solutions. And this brings me to the last slide of my presentation. I want to thank you for your time and for the opportunity to present here. And if you want to read the report or any other report, please go to our website or contact me if you have any questions. Thank you. Over to Nick.
Thank you very much, Leanne, and some surprising findings there from the MSC Zoe. I wonder how many of those containers were poorly packed, and perhaps the weight and the accelerations were added to by perhaps something that was misdeclared. We'll never know. But one person that might be able to give us some information about packing containers, I'm told that we have regained contact with Daniel Millett from marine consultancy Brookes Bell, and he's going to run us through some issues with packing, container packing. Thank you, Daniel.
I will keep my video off because just to keep due to the Wi-Fi connection, and hopefully you can all hear me now. Yes, I just want to go through some of my experiences while working for Brookes Bell and the experiences I've come across with container cargoes. So in a previous life, I worked 14 years at sea in all ranks up to master. On predominantly ro-ro vessels for foreland shipping, but we carried a variety of great bulk cargo and containers, as you can see here. We had our fair share of container ships, mainly cargo ships, mainly minor, but we had this very large one over about 15 years ago. As Leanne's just pointed out, she mentioned about the accelerations on the MSC Zoe. Well, to visualize, a container and a piece of cargo on a vessel, what you need to understand is that acceleration forces, on a piece of cargo in the ship are greater the higher you are in the stack and the higher you are on the vessel, and the further outboard you are from the center of gravity. So it makes sense when they're designing cargo security manuals that the heavier containers go lower in the stack and towards the vessel's center of gravity. However, the container may be lashed appropriately, but if it's any cargo inside is not lashed inside properly, then there's a potential then for the container security system to be overloaded, and the crew have no way of checking once a container has been locked and secured. So just briefly, some regulations, statutory regulations, and best practice that we adhere to when we're securing cargo and containers. The SOLAS Chapter 6 says that every vessel should have a cargo security manual. So it's a requirement of SOLAS that the vessel has a cargo, and they're ship specific, and they're approved by a classification society for that vessel. However, there is some drawbacks on the cargo security manual in that they have design set cargo patterns. But if, for argument, say the vessel was carrying a lot of empty containers, then the shipping line has to accommodate that, then there's nothing in the cargo security manual that says the vessel is carrying all these empty containers mixed in with full containers. So it brings up challenges and limitations with that cargo security manual. The CSS code is best practice, and what we find, the relevant sections of that are usually copied verbatim into the cargo security manual, and that then becomes mandatory under the cargo security manual, the relevant sections. And then, as I'm going to come into later in the presentation, I'll talk about the CTU code and the packing and stuffing of containers and in there. Now, just briefly, in 2016, there was the introduction into SOLAS, the new amendment that the containers, the weight of the container should be verified. Before that, the shipper only had to declare it. But then we got this regular, and the shipping industry and the container industry adapted. They got the infrastructure together, and now all ships now should have the container should have a VGM when it's loaded on board. So we know that if a container is verified VGM is 15 ton, we know that container weighs 15 ton. However, that verified weight may be insignificant if some other aspects are not followed. So if the container is not secured in accordance with the Cargo Security Manual or the CSS code, or the cargo inside is not stored and secured properly, then there's a potential for a cargo shift or collapse of stack. Maintenance and corrosion of securing fittings on board. Yesterday I saw there's a preliminary report for the APL England, and corrosion of lashings is mentioned in there. Ship handling by the master, did he slow down, did he alter course, and stability in GM and roll period, which Leanne has just referred to in her presentation. So now I'm going to show you just some examples of where the containers have not been stowed or secured in accordance with the Cargo Security Manual. So this vessel I attended, one bay, had a shift of cargo in one bay. We got to look at the Cargo Security Manual, and when I was identifying how it should have been loaded, if you see on the left-hand slide there, you've got tier and stack weights, and you can see that the top tier there is a 3.5 ton, which is an empty container weight, 7 ton, 20 ton, and then 27 ton. So that's what the Cargo Security Manual said that the weights, limiting weights in that tier was. However, if you go to the right, if you take your eyes to the right, then if you look what was loaded in there, you've got like 29, 30 ton boxes, 28 ton, 23 ton, 29 ton. So you've got these heavy containers, nearly over 3-4 times heavier than what the limits in there, that was loaded in there. So what you get in there is higher acceleration forces, and no wonder that the containers had a container shift in there. Now, with this, what can be done to improve this? Now, obviously, better communication between the shoreside planners and the ship's crew. Recently, speaking to a chief officer, and he said they had like 20 minutes to approve. Then the planner came on board to the commencement of loading. So they're basically, short periods in port, quick turnarounds, the various, changes to the bay plan, changes to the storage plan. This, can anything be done to reduce that, so that the ship's crew have sufficient time to check that there is compliance with the tier weights. This one was a container shift and a collapse of stack in a hold. If you look there in the center of the hold, where the arrow is, there's something missing. Now, when I looked at the Cargo Security Manual, there should have been a cell guide, a removable cell guide that was in here. Now this it had been removed, and so effectively the containers at that end had not been secured. And then they got into adverse weather in the Bay of Biscay, and there was a shift. Now, when speaking to the master on board, he said they'd have no problems for 3 years. They had no problems for 3 years. Why has this happened? And the reason was they was on a Baltic charter. So the seas in the Baltic, for those that don't know, are not the same as what you would expect in the Bay of Biscay, where you get high seas and swells. So it was basically they'd got away with it for 3 years, and nobody cared to notice. But the maiden voyage on a new charter, I think, attending another collapse of stack, again, looking at the twist locks. So if you imagine now that this is a twist lock, and you look at the orientation of that twist lock, it's a manual twist lock with the locking handle to the right there. Now, if you would imagine the container that's missing is on top of that container, then how there's no way of locking that twist lock once the container's gone on top of it. So there's no way for the stevedores or dockers to lock. There's no way for the crew to check prior to departure, and then there's no way of the crew to check. So it's incorrect orientation of twist locks, which were not in accordance with the cargo securing manual. Now the outboard stack they'd lost the outboard stack on this container vessel. I attended again, did our investigation, asked to see the cargo securing manual, and on the right circle there it says 40-foot container only, and that position where that container was should have only been a 40-foot. But if you can see, they had 45-foot containers, and what that did, this is the port side, the opposite side, and you can see they've been storing 45-foot containers there, and there's no way for the lashing bars and lashing rods to be affixed to the aft end. So that means that effectively that container on the other side had only been secured with the twist locks and not the lashing bar, the extra lashing, as per the cargo securing manual. So now I'll just come on to maintenance of securing equipment. So the vessel should have, a planned maintenance regime on board. It's referred to in CSS code, cargo securing manual, and records could be kept, because you go on any vessel and any incident, you would ask to see the maintenance records. The issue is on these large container ships, or large ro-ro vessels for that matter, you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of equipment. Now, when you go on board a vessel and you go to where there's been a container shift, and you see a twist lock on the deck that looks like that, heavily corroded, ball bearings gone on the inside, there's no locking handle, it should have been flagged up during routine maintenance that it shouldn't be in use. But what's it then gets still in the stack, and then it ends up in the stack, and if it's in the wrong place, and there's potential then for a failure. This one, if you look at this, the container footing in the tank top there, then if you look, the aperture, they'd worn away, and the tolerances, they'd worn away over time. And what that allowed that to do is that stacking cone had spun 180 degrees during the forces and the racking, and it pierced the fuel tank below. So then we had a large, cleanup operation and a container and a claim. So now going to the CTU code. Now this has recently been updated into a quick guide, which for the younger, particularly younger generation now, they like to read the news on social media in bite size. So that is a welcome. It's a quick reference, quick guide. I understand it's going to become more digitalized and electronic. At the right hand side there, I've just highlighted some of the recommendations regarding stowing cargo inside. About bracing and showing and no gaps and no voids, and stowing cargo this side up. That's what the CT code say. I'm now going to show you some examples where that wasn't followed. So last year I attended a large, one of the large container ships that had a fire, and I went out there and I was able to inspect over 300 containers, not related thing, but as a surveyor and as an ex-seafarer, some of the findings that I found was quite revealing. This one, they was trying to get the container out of the cell guide, but it couldn't go, and we found that the weight was not evenly spread across the weight of the container, which is recommended in the CTU code. So what that involved doing, we had to devan the jumbo bags there to be able to get that container out of the cell guide. Now this this container had heavy granite slabs in, 25 to 30 ton container. When we was on the quay waiting for it to come out, containers to come out, we was writing down, and we was finding that we had the bay plan, and these were not following the bay plan, so they was out of position, albeit within the hold below deck. However, if these are out of position below deck, there's a potential that could eventually, work its way onto the upper deck, and then on deck, and then it could be higher in like the other slide I showed. You've got 30-ton containers out of position that the crew or the planners don't know it's out of position. So as you can see here, another container. There was no shift here, but opening it, you can see the gaps and void spaces that are not recommended. That are not recommended in the CTU code. So no attempt to brace the cargo. Again, opening the container. They've not used any cargo nets or anything. Gaps and voids. Potential for that then creates to move if the vessel got into heavy weather or adverse weather. This one made all the surveyors laugh on the quay, because you open a door and the big sign says "store this way up," and the arrows are pointing the other way. So finally, what can be done to reduce container ships? Well, as some of you are probably aware, the AMSA and the Australian government have took the lead, and they're doing an enhanced focused campaign on securing arrangements on board vessels. And they've got this checklist that the port state control has, and if I don't know if you can read that, but it says check the cargo secure manual, VGM, or the crew trained and familiar with the lashing arrangements, or the condition of the condition and the maintenance of all the securing systems. So it's a bit like an aide-memoire. I sort of use myself when I go on board a vessel, but the Australian government are taking a lead. Now the question is, can this be now taken on to other port states? Could they be doing it? Or I think another interesting study that you may be aware of or may not be aware of, the National Cargo Bureau in the past few years, they inspected 500 containers, mainly to do with dangerous goods. But if you read the bottom paragraph there, 55% of the inspected containers failed to comply, including 33% for poor securing of cargo within the container. Now the question is, do we, to reduce container shifts and problems with cargo claims, can we start randomly inspecting more containers before loading? It comes down to cost and time, but these are sort of things that maybe we need to start considering. And finally, the last slide. These are just some things that are food for thought. What could be done to provoke conversation. Can the CTU code be made mandatory, not guidance? And then more random inspections, as I've said, increased port state inspections. One thing to do with the cargo securing manual, can that become like a periodic review, like the ship security plan, an audit, so that it's not when the ship's designed and it has this, a dynamic plan, and so it's regularly updated, and also training a ship's crew to include knowledge and application of CSM. Basically, ship's crew do a lot of computer-based training, safety. A lot of it's safety, but then should we not include more container stuff? A short presentation of a lot of stuff that happens when cargo shifts. Maybe get the message across and things. So, and then, as I've said there, increased penalties for non-compliance. And that concludes my presentation. I hope, and it was a pleasure to hear it, and I hope I'm happy to answer some questions shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. one of the recurring themes of this cargo integrity seminar series has been enforcement and communication. Every seminar we have had people talking about whether there's the will or the systems in order to enforce regulations, and how people communicate, and whether that communication can be improved. And I think that came across in Daniel's presentation there. Random inspections that you mentioned at the end there cost time, but they also, without them, they could cost lives. And I think that's also a takeaway. I was wondering, Daniel, if you could answer a quick question for me as we move into the Q&A section of this discussion. Would be grateful actually for any listeners to send in their questions now. But Daniel, can you say how we can teach and how we can improve the packing of containers? What, is it CTU code? Is it something else?
The CTU code is the guidance, and I mean the issue you have is that people packing a container don't necessarily know the journey it's going to go on, and don't appreciate the acceleration forces that we mentioned, and it's going to go on a ship. They become complacent. They think, okay, they're in a nice warehouse somewhere. They pack it, and then they just think it gets to the other side, but they don't realize the journey that it goes on, and whether it goes on rail or on a sea, it's going to move. So I don't think we get that appreciation now. I don't quite know how we could, get somebody in a warehouse to ship. We need to improve it and get the message across. We have technology. I mean, can technology be done when you do a packing list? Can we not, sort of take photographs of the stowage and securing arrangement inside? That's then digitally attached to the packing list, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe people can then see what it's like inside without having to physically open it. I mean, that's just something I've just thought of now. It can that be done? I don't know. It's just the enforcing that and getting that message across to the wider container industry and people responsible for packing.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to invite all the speakers now to turn on their cameras, and I have a couple of questions coming in for the Q&A section. And we'll start with Leanne. I have a question from, I'm sorry if I pronounced this incorrectly, Yulen Karen. Her question is, what is the threshold for it to qualify as pollution for an investigation?
That's a really good question, because actually there is no threshold for this. Pollution comes in two categories if we look at our maritime obligation, and we see the serious marine casualties and the very serious marine casualties. And the only difference regarding pollution is that with the very serious it says severe pollution, and of course it's debatable what is severe pollution. So there is no threshold, but in this case, if you look at the polluted beaches and everything, and the amount of containers, 342, that made us decide that this was severe pollution and that we had the obligation to investigate. The other thing we came across is that actually within the rules and regulations, pollution is always seen as an oil spill or some fluids that went overboard, and we had discussions on whether debris of containers was under this as well. But we thought it was important enough to investigate, and we came up with some interesting material. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. We have a question here from Peter LaHaye in Canada for Christian. Can you talk about why seafarers actually undertake such dangerous work as lashing? And why port state authorities do nothing about it?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for your question. Why the seafarers actually undertake such dangerous work? Because the typical labor supplying countries, there are many seafarers, especially ratings, looking for a job. So it's very simple. If they come on board of the vessel and if they refuse to do lashing and securing, they lose their job. They get a negative evaluation, and the first plane bringing them back home, they will be on it, and another one will come to replace them, one who will do the lashing. Now, the second part of the question on the port state authorities, there you have two kind of port state authorities, in my opinion. You have the port authorities who can take an effort, who can make a stand. Obviously, they never do it because of commercial interest, but the port captains, port lieutenants could check a vessel before departure if all cargo is secured according to the cargo lashing manual. A second element is that you have the port state control, and I have been in conversation with port state control on that, and they can only ascertain a deficiency on cargo activities, cargo handling activities, if it's taking place. So, for example, if the seafarer is climbing a container to unlash that container, it need to be pictured, or it need to be just at that moment the port state control inspector need to pass and see that he's climbing that container. Otherwise, he can actually not write any deficiency for that. So this is really double, and the port state control can only write deficiencies if it's regarding the seafarer. So if the port state control see the docker climbing a container, like I have shown on that pictures in my presentation, he cannot write any deficiency. That's my understanding. So in that way, it limited really a lot the possibilities for port state control to ascertain typical climbing situations or where the lashing is not done safely. And last, it has nothing to do with the authorities, not directly, however they could check on it. This is the safety harnesses and the use of it. Dockers will complain that the vessel is not safe to lash for them because of missing railings or fencings, while the ship or the ship owners will say, oh, there is no issue because if you use a safety harness. Okay, that's correct. But first of all, you have hardly any places where you can put the line of the safety, where you can hook the line of the safety harness to. And if you have that kind of place, the movement of the person who is going to do that lashing is very limited. Quite often he can't even go to the ground to pick up the lashing bar or whatever equipment he needs. So there is a second person needed to assist that guy. So that means that you need like already your full deck row for 2 persons, so 4 persons who will deliver actually the job of 2 persons. Well, vessels don't have enough crew, so that it will take too long time to make the full lashing. It will take many hours, and if in a short turnaround between ports with distances 10 hours berth to berth, of course this is not realistic. So the safety harnesses are probably only used for painting the vessel if they have time, and that's it, but never by seafarers, or hardly ever by seafarers, to do the lashing, because there is no time for it, and it's too complicated, and there is no material to hook up, and so on. So I hope this answers your question a bit, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. We have another question here from George
Hi everyone, it's Catherine in the background here. We just lost Nick very temporarily, but I can ask the question on his behalf. So this is a question from George Kokanowski, and the question is, how was it possible to stack a heavy container on top of 3 empties? Or was it supposed to be an empty container? And I think this question is for Daniel.
Thanks, Catherine. Was it referring to a specific slide in my presentation?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the question is about how is it possible to stack a heavy container on top of 3 empties? So I guess it was something in your presentation, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. There wasn't 3 empties. There was just if you were into one of the first slides of the container ship that I showed, there was obviously 30-ton containers at the top of the stack. Below there wasn't empties. There was partially full. I was referring to the limit on that tier in the cargo secure manual had limits of 3.5, 7, 20 ton, and we was in excess of all that with 29.9 and 30 ton. They wasn't stored on empty containers. Just there was heavier containers on top of lighter containers. I don't think there was a slide where there was 3 empties below. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel. Hi, it's Catherine again here. Nick, our chairman, has just lost connection, Wi-Fi connection temporarily, so he's going to join back any minute. But so for now, I'm just going to proceed with the Q&A here. So actually, sorry, Daniel, another question for you here.
Okay.
And this is from Edward Andrews. The question is, you mentioned that 6.5% of dangerous goods cargoes are misdeclared. Is this done intentionally, or is this just done by error, do you think?
Okay, well that figure came from that study, that NCB report. That's not my figures. So yeah, I mean, we've had previous presentations on the misdeclaration of dangerous goods. Cargo misdeclaration. It has been known to be done intentionally and accidentally. So I can't put the figure on what's done intentionally or not. Just that we know it's a serious problem within the container industry, and it's a hot topic at the moment. Thank you.
And again, I'm not sure if Nick has asked this already, but another question coming from Peter LeHay in Canada, which is, why are AMSA always the leading port state authority? And shouldn't the Paris MOU and Tokyo MOU step up? I'm not sure if that's been answered yet. If not, if one of our speakers can volunteer an answer for that question, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Peter. Yes, I agree. AMSA seems to take the lead on a lot of topics and issues, and they do take the lead. And as I said in the final slide of our presentation, more port states should step up to the plate and do more random inspections of both vessels and containers. So yeah, I agree that the other port states should step up, and I'm sure it'll only be a matter of time before they do. But good on the Australians for leading the way. But unfortunately, it takes an incident usually for this to happen. So yeah, thank you.
Hi, Catherine, and everybody. I am back. My apologies for losing you there. In fact, we have come to the end of our time, and I'd like to thank our speakers who have been excellent again. I'd like to thank the TT Club, and I'd like to think about some of the takeaways that we have from this series of seminars that we've done. And I think the key things that came over for us were the lack of enforcement, or at least the random enforcement of a lot of regulations, the lack of communication between different parts of the business, and the hope that somehow digitalization might remedy some of these problems. It is current that I'd like to think that Container News has had some effect in prompting the IMO to take up those discussions, though actually I believe that the TT Club and people like Peregrine Stores Fox have been pushing for quite some time for change and for improvement. So again, I'd like to say thank you and to all our viewers for joining us, and perhaps we'll see you next year when we have another series of webinars. Thank you very much and goodbye.